Now, you will have seen loads of different headlines over the course of the weekend about how Chris Whitty thinks that the infection rate is going in the wrong direction. We are told the R rate, which I've already told you, doesn't really mean a fag end at the end of the day, because the R rate is generated by collecting loads and loads of data, including what people are actually doing. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is a massive rate of infection, but if you took it seriously, what we know from back in March and April was that the R rate was up to around about 3, which means for every person that got infected with coronavirus, 3 other people did. They reckon now it's less than 1.5. Scared Whittyless is the front page headline on the front page of The Sun. COVID curves will last for 6 months, Number 10 warns. Let's talk to Nigel Farage, leader of the Brexit Party, who put out a very, what I can say is a very persuasive video yesterday about why the cure is now worse than the disease. Nigel, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed. Very worthwhile, that video, I thought, yesterday, because you kind of put your cards on the table, nailed it really, by saying that if they do decide that what the cure for this particular disease is to keep the economy going is to shut down the economy, it's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I mean, look, let's talk health to begin with, shall we?
Yeah.
Cancer diagnoses are down 75%. Treatment for chronic heart condition down nearly 70%. Goodness knows what the mental well-being of millions of people is, as they now fear that if we have a second lockdown, their time on furlough, some of which was quite fun, really, wasn't it? Because the sun was shining and have a beer in the garden. But the reality that that's going to mean long-term unemployment. And you begin to realize that so many people are not getting diagnoses, are not getting medical care, are not getting help and treatment that they need. You may well find the death toll from misdiagnoses in the end is even greater than those who die from this disease. And look, I do know people myself who've been very ill with coronavirus, and I do completely understand why we should be sensible and why a degree of social distancing, hand sanitizing, I get all of that. But the truth of it is, and you can tell from what Sadiq Khan's saying, you can tell by what's been trailed ahead of this 11 o'clock press conference this morning, the Vallance and Whitty show.
Yes.
Oh, that it were a comedy, but it's not. And you can tell we're going into lockdown. 13 million people in England are in lockdown already. And I genuinely think the economic harm, the health harm is far worse than facing a reality, which is there is no miracle cure. All this rubbish we hear about vaccines being ready by Christmas, it just isn't going to happen, Mike. So the truth of it is, we have got to learn to live with this, and we can be encouraged by a couple of things. One, that medically, we now know much better how to deal with this. And two, look at countries where the number of diagnoses are going through the roof, and you'll see that whilst hospitalizations are up, they're not up very much. And I think, I get the feeling, Baroness Dido Harding said she was surprised that infection rates had gone up. Well, I'll tell you what, Baroness, it's September. The kids have gone back to school. It happens every single year, and yet they appear to be surprised. My feeling overall is that Whitty, Vallance, Gove, Cummings, Johnson, and Hancock, their fear is that the historical legacy would be that huge numbers of people died and they stood aside and did nothing. That is what they're scared of. Now, look, I know they're in very high pressure situations and these are big decisions, but it's taken me months to come to this conclusion. But I genuinely this morning believe that now the potential cure of a second lockdown is genuinely worse than us learning to live with the disease.
Yes, I think there's no doubt, Nigel, and a lot of people like you have come to the conclusion after months of support for this government, because we all wanted to see a Brexit supporting government doing well. We all wanted to see Brexit happening. That appears to be going okay. But we also wanted to see a Tory government which was elected to be strong on public order, to be strong on immigration, to be strong on leaving the European Union. And quite frankly, what it isn't at the moment is strong on anything to do with coronavirus. And also, what we also know is that you can't just keep locking down the economy for 2 weeks every month or so, because that's going to kill it off. It's not going to save it, is it?
No, it doesn't work. And I mean, the other thing that was amazing was to find yesterday morning that by ministerial decree, if you test positive for coronavirus, or if somebody who has tested positive tells the track and trace scheme that they were in, close physical proximity to you, you could be fined up to £10,000 for simply leaving your house. I mean, it's draconian. It's been done without any parliamentary consultation, without any public debate. I mean, we are supposed to be a democracy. I mean, that's what Brexit was about, so that we could make decisions. So to be ruled by ministerial decree is simply wrong. And the irony that you could get fined 10 grand, even though you haven't got the virus. And yet, if you want to go, Mike, wear a paramilitary uniform, march through Brixton, vandalise Churchill's statue for the umpteenth time, desecrate the cenotaph, you can be pretty certain of one thing: nothing will happen to you. And it is this misapplication, this double standard that we're seeing right across law and order that I think is making Middle England very angry indeed.
Oh, absolutely right. And I think this whole idea of track and trace is flawed in the first place. We had somebody who works in the system call us last week, and he said basically, if you call somebody and they don't answer the phone, there's nothing they can do. They call about 20 times and they give up. They're not allowed to give a number for you to call them back on. Equally, I said to him, what happens if somebody lives in a shared house and one person is found to have to isolate? Does that mean everybody else does? And he didn't know the answer.
No, I've heard of an example of two families sharing a house where one family have been told they have to isolate and the other family have been told they don't have to. So, yeah, look, it's all over the place. The other thing that annoys me is we've had 6 months of failure, 6 months of missed targets, 6 months of promises, ridiculous promises not being met. And now what Prefect Hancock does is tell us it's all your fault. Yes. It's our fault. We've not been responsible. Therefore, we must be bullied and fined if necessary. And, even President Macron, who I'm not the greatest fan of, but he went on live national television in France and said, look, we underestimated this. We've made mistakes. I'm sorry. We're doing our best. A degree of honesty.
Yes.
At no point has that pipsqueak Hancock admitted that he's got anything wrong.
Well, I mean, it'd be harder for him to admit that he got something right, wouldn't it? Because I can't think of anything in particular off the top of my head. But I mean, this is the other problem where they keep saying to us, but we're following the science. It's very clear now, Nigel, that the science doesn't even agree with the science. There's Carl Hennigan saying one thing, there's Chris Whitty saying another. Now, if you're an ordinary layman or woman, who are you supposed to believe?
Well, that's right. I mean, the whole idea that the science was settled was what Tony Blair told us over climate change. And it was a similar line that Boris used from the start. We're following the science. Science always profoundly disagrees. And I actually think that for a national press conference to take place at 11 o'clock this morning with two government-appointed officials telling us our future, telling us our fortune, is outrageous. It was Margaret Thatcher that said that advisors advise and ministers decide. And it's almost as if we've got the blame being shifted from Boris Hancock Gove and the government onto these two guys. They're appointees. And of course, their advice to central government is very, very important. But it looks this morning like rule by bureaucrats, government by ministerial degree, and it's undemocratic, it's disproportionate. And I'm urging people, please contact your MP. Please say no to a second lockdown, and please insist that any big decisions that fundamentally affect the lives of tens of millions of us are debated openly in the House of Commons, through the media. Let's have a national debate, not Mr. Hancock or Chris Whitty deciding our future.
Yes, exactly right. And we've just heard Andrew Bridgen on the news there, being one of those MPs who's on your side on this, who wants to have the proper debate, because the whole idea of these extra powers that were brought in was that they would be reviewed in 6 months' time. You can't just turn around and go, well, now we're not going to review them, we're just going to add another 6 months. I mean, it's ridiculous.
No. Well, thank goodness that David Davis got the amendment passed, which said a six-month review, because originally the government wanted this to be in place for 2 years. This is supposed to be a Conservative government with a Prime Minister who we told is a Libertarian. I mean, I think some days it feels like Jeremy Corbyn won the last election.
Yeah, well, I mean, not that one is to be into conspiracy theories, but I was amused to read a conspiracy theory the other day, which actually said that when Boris Johnson went into hospital, it wasn't him that came out. It was somebody else that looked like Boris Johnson, but in fact was not. But obviously that's not true. But I mean, the bottom line for me is that the people of this country, almost to a man and woman, by far and away do not want a second lockdown. They are fed up to the back teeth of not being able to go wherever they want to go, whenever they want to do it. You know, yes, of course, people are going to be sensible, but we don't need to tell everyone to shut the schools, to get back inside your houses, to not go anywhere, to shut all the pubs down, to shut every business down and wreck the entire nation.
Yeah, get onto your MPs, put the pressure on, make Boris's government understand you're saying no to a second lockdown and that they may never get your vote again unless they start opening this up to a proper democratic process. And, you know, maybe that'll have an effect because this government operates more on followership than it does leadership.
Yes.
They've U-turned more than any government I've seen in my lifetime. They're scared of public opinion. They're scared of the polls. So make your feelings known, please.
Yes, indeed. And while we're on the subject of making your feelings known, I've also similarly been asking people to write to their MPs to ask them about whether or not any illegal migrants are being housed in their constituencies. You'd made another video last week, Nigel, which was very interesting, down at that camp, barracks, I should say, down in Folkestone, next door to where the Gurkhas were. I believe today is the day that all starts kind of kicking off, isn't it?
Yes, up to 400 people will be moved into the Shorncliffe barracks, barracks on the cliffs above Folkestone, barracks that were originally built to stop the Napoleonic invasion, and barracks that now will be hosting those who are part of this year's invasion. I spoke to local councillors, I spoke to residents. They've no idea who's going to come, but you can bet your bottom dollar it'll be 400 young men. It's an open camp. They'll be out mixing in the community, and this is not a recipe for happy relations with the local community. There's also an army camp in South Wales that's going to be used. Lots of hotels are filled, lots of private accommodation. And I make this prediction. Tomorrow, we'll see, and I've got this intelligence this morning, all right? Tomorrow, we'll see an attempt by hundreds to leave the beaches of northern France and come to the EU, and come to the UK. Now, if I know this is happening tomorrow already, I would like to think the Home Secretary, I would like to think Border Force, I would like to think the French authorities would know that too. Let's see, this time tomorrow, Mike, let's see whether my prediction's right, and let's see whether anybody has lifted a finger. Otherwise, we'll get another army camp full tomorrow.
Interesting that you say that, because we wondered on Friday whether Serco had been instructed to move people from hotels, because that was seen as unpalatable now, into these barracks. We got an answer from Serco which said that they have nothing to do with the barracks whatsoever. So these are clearly new migrants who are claiming asylum who are being put into these barracks type accommodation. So it's not as if they're moving people. These are extra people.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I mean, the number of people who've come to Britain illegally that we're now housing is now over 50,000. 50,000. And I can tell you, my inbox every day is from people who can't get GP appointments, from people who feel that the streets of their local town are not as safe as they used to be, from people telling me, groups of migrants, forget about the rule of 6. I mean, they were out on the beach at Hoylake in Liverpool the other day with a big football game. This is, I honestly don't think that stuck in London, the government understand just how unhappy their own supporters are. A recent YouGov poll showed 97% of Conservative voters concerned or very concerned about what's going on. But looking ahead, Mike, if we may for a moment, on the 1st of January, we leave the Dublin regulations. We leave that part of EU rules that makes it very difficult to send anybody back to Calais if they haven't claimed asylum in France or Europe first. It's been a problem for Priti Patel. By act of British Parliament, those rules end on the 1st of January, 2021. But, and here's the problem, we need a new agreement in place between us and the French so that we can start returning people properly from January the 1st. And from what I can see, the French are being wholly uncooperative, because it's not really in their interest, is it, to do this deal? So we're facing a moment in the next few weeks when either the French do a deal with us and we recognise international law as it should be upheld, or we'll see whether the government has the courage to act unilaterally from January the 1st. If they don't get a deal or have the courage to act unilaterally, this migrant boat crisis in the Channel could go on for years.
It really could. Nigel Farage, thank you very much indeed. Nigel Farage, Brexit Party leader, speaking an awful lot of sense there on what you should be doing as far as this government's policies are concerned. They're thinking about a lockdown. They're threatening a lockdown. They're talking about a lockdown. They haven't yet ordered a lockdown. What Nigel Farage wants you to do is to write to your MP, tell your MP that you're not happy about the possibility of a new lockdown and that therefore you would not be supportive of any MP that voted for it. And you also want to make sure that whatever new laws and whatever new provisions are put into place over the next 6 months, that they are debated properly in the Houses of Parliament. This is a democracy. It is not an autocracy. It is not a dictatorship. We do not wish to live under that. And if we did, we wouldn't have voted in an election in December. It's as simple as that, isn't it?